"Stand by me as my wife," the millionaire said. His hidden reason broke her heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to the main character. The rain had just started to fall when Daniel Wright stepped out of his car and into the quiet underground garage. The concrete echoed with his footsteps, sharp and controlled, the way everything in his life had become. Daniel was a self-made millionaire, the kind whose name carried weight in boardrooms and headlines. At 38, he owned a technology firm valued well into 9 figures, drove a black sedan with no logos, and lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city without ever truly belonging to it. That night, however, none of that mattered. Daniel stood still, his phone pressed tightly to his ear, listening as his mother's voice broke on the other end of the line. The doctors had not used hopeful words. They had used careful ones. Time was limited. Family would be arriving soon. And with them came expectations Daniel had spent years avoiding. He ended the call and exhaled slowly, resting his forehead against the cool metal of the car door. For the first time in a long while, the man who never lost control felt the edges of it slipping. That was when he saw her. She was standing near the elevator, clutching a canvas tote bag to her chest, clearly unsure if she should step inside or wait. Her shoes were worn, her coat too thin for the early winter air, and her eyes carried the look of someone used to being overlooked. Her name was Emily Carter, and at that moment, she was thinking about how to stretch $40 until Friday. Emily had just finished a late shift at the catering company that rented space in the same building. She did not belong here, and she knew it. People like Daniel usually passed right through her world without ever noticing it existed. But Daniel noticed her, not because she was beautiful in an obvious way, though she was, but because she looked real, grounded, unprepared for the storm he was about to invite her into. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but urgent, stopping her before the elevator doors closed. Emily turned, startled. "Yes?" For a brief second, Daniel hesitated. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals with less fear than what he felt now. Then he spoke, the words coming out low and deliberate, as if saying them any louder might make them impossible to take back. "I need your help," he said, "just for tonight." Emily frowned, instinctively stepping back half an inch. "I do not even know you." "I know," Daniel replied, "and I would not ask if there were any other option." The elevator chimed, waiting. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time all evening, he let the truth slip through the cracks of his carefully built armor. "Stand by me as my wife," Daniel said quietly. In front of them. Emily stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "Your wife?" "Pretend," he added quickly. "Only pretend. No lies beyond what is necessary. No expectations after tonight." She searched his face for arrogance, for mockery, for the kind of cruelty that came with wealth. She found none, only tension, only a man cornered by something money could not fix. "And why would I do that?" she asked. Daniel swallowed. His answer was already there, heavy and painful, waiting for the right moment to be spoken. He glanced toward the elevator, toward the upper floors where his family and his past were about to collide. "Because if I walk in alone," he said, "everything I have worked to protect will fall apart." Emily did not know it yet, but that single sentence was the beginning of a choice that would change both of their lives forever. The elevator doors slid shut behind them with a soft metallic hum. For a moment, neither Daniel Wright nor Emily Carter spoke. The car began to rise, smooth and silent, carrying them upward through the building Daniel had designed as carefully as his public image. Emily stood near the wall, her canvas tote still clutched in both hands, her heart beating faster with every passing floor. She could feel the weight of the question hanging between them, heavy and unresolved. Finally, she broke the silence. "You asked me to pretend to be your wife," Emily said carefully. "You did not ask if I wanted to be part of whatever storm you are walking into." Daniel turned to face her fully. The overhead light caught the sharp lines of his face, but there was something unguarded in his eyes now. He nodded once. "That is fair," he said. "You deserve to know exactly what you are agreeing to." The elevator slowed briefly. then continued its ascent. "My family is arriving tonight," Daniel went on. "They have not been together in one room in years. When they do not come to celebrate. They come to judge." Emily frowned. "Judge what?" "Me," he answered simply, "and everything I did not give them." He paused, choosing his words with care, as if each one carried a cost. "My mother believes that stability looks like marriage," Daniel said. "Not because she is old-fashioned, but because she is afraid. Afraid of leaving this world knowing her son is alone." Emily felt something soften in her chest despite herself. "And if you show up alone," she said, "they will blame you." "They already do," Daniel replied. "Tonight they will just be louder about it." The elevator doors opened briefly at an empty floor, then closed again. Time felt suspended, like the moment before a decision could no longer be taken back. Emily shifted her weight. "So you want me to stand next to you," she said slowly, "so they believe you are not alone." "Yes," Daniel said, "only that." She studied him then, really studied him. This was not a man asking for a trophy. This was a man asking for cover. "And after tonight?" she asked. "After tonight," Daniel said, "we walk away. No obligations, no expectations. I will compensate you for your time, and you will never hear from me again unless you want to." Emily let out a quiet breath. The word compensate landed heavily in the small space. "I am not for sale," she said. Daniel did not flinch. "I know," he said. "That is why I am asking, not demanding." The elevator slowed again. This time, it did not start back up. They had reached the top. Daniel reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a slim folder. He did not hand it to her immediately. "There are rules," he said. "Clear ones." He opened the folder just enough for her to see the neatly printed page inside. "Tonight only," he continued. "You stand beside me. You let them believe what they want to believe. You do not owe me affection. You do not owe me silence. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, you walk away, and I will handle the consequences." Emily looked at the folder, then back at him. "And what do you owe me?" Daniel met her gaze. "Respect," he said. "From the moment we stepped through those doors." The elevator chimed softly, reminding them that the doors were still closed, waiting. Emily swallowed. Images of her empty apartment, her overdue bills, and her constant balancing of survival flickered through her mind. But louder than all of that was something else, the truth in his voice. She reached out, not for the folder, but for the space between them. "If I do this," Emily said, her voice steady, "I do it as a person, not a prop." Daniel nodded. "That is all I am asking." The elevator doors finally opened, revealing a polished hallway and the distant sound of voices waiting beyond it. Emily took one last breath. "Tonight," she said, "I stand with you. But when this ends, it ends on my terms." A faint, genuine smile crossed Daniel Wright's face for the first time that evening. "Agreed," he said. Together, they stepped forward, unaware that this agreement, meant to last only a few hours, had already begun to change the rules of both their lives. They stepped out of the elevator together. The hallway was brighter than Emily expected, lined with soft lighting and framed photographs that told a quiet story of success. Men and women in tailored suits moved easily through the space, their voices low, confident, familiar. This was Daniel Wright's world. Emily felt it immediately, the invisible line between those who belonged and those who were merely passing through. Daniel slowed his pace so she could walk beside him. "Stay close," he said quietly. "Not because I need it, because they will watch everything." Emily nodded, straightening her shoulders. She adjusted the strap of her tote bag, then hesitated. "That will not work," Daniel said gently, noticing her movement. She looked at him, confused. "They will notice that before they notice you," he added, glancing at the bag. Without touching her, he held out his arm. Emily stared at it for half a second longer than necessary. Then she placed her hand on his sleeve. The reaction was immediate. Conversations nearby softened, heads turned, eyes lingered. Emily felt the shift like a wave moving through the room. She was no longer invisible. She was being evaluated. They entered the main living area, where a group of people stood around a long table set with glasses and untouched food. At the center of it all stood a woman with silver hair pulled back neatly, her posture dignified despite the fatigue in her eyes. Daniel stopped. "That is my mother," he he said softly. Emily looked at the woman again, noticing the subtle tremor in her hands, the careful way she leaned on the table, as if conserving strength. This was not a powerful matriarch guarding her territory. This was a woman trying to hold her family together for as long as she could. Before Emily could say anything, Daniel's mother turned. Her gaze locked onto him first. Then it moved to Emily, and everything changed. "Daniel," she said, her voice lifting with surprise, "you did not tell me you were bringing someone." Daniel inhaled once, then smiled, the kind of smile that did not reach his eyes but softened his face. "Mom," he said, "this is Emily, my wife." The word landed with weight. Emily felt it in her chest before she felt it in her ears. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Daniel's mother stepped forward, her eyes filling with tears that surprised everyone, including herself. "My goodness," she whispered, "you are married." She reached out, taking Emily's hands without hesitation. Her grip was warm, sincere. "You have no idea how long I have waited to hear that," she said. Emily swallowed, fighting the sudden burn behind her eyes. "It is nice to meet you," Emily said, her voice steady. "I am very glad to finally be here." Daniel's mother smiled at her, really smiled, then turned back to her son. "You did not tell me," she repeated, but now there was relief in her tone, not accusation. Daniel lowered his gaze slightly. "It happened quietly," he said, "the way Emily prefers." Emily felt his thumb press lightly against her hand, grounding her. One by one the others approached. An older man with sharp eyes and an even sharper smile looked Emily up and down. "She is not what I expected," he said. Daniel answered before Emily could. "That is why she matters." The man raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. As the evening unfolded, Emily found herself navigating conversations she had never imagined being part of. Questions came wrapped in politeness, each one testing her place. "Where did you meet? How long have you known each other? What does she do?" Emily answered honestly, without apology. "I work in catering," she said at one point. "I like work that keeps me on my feet." There was a pause. Then Daniel's mother nodded approvingly. "Good," she said. "A woman who knows how to work will never abandon you when things are hard." Daniel glanced at Emily, something unreadable passing between them. Across the room, Emily noticed a woman watching her closely. Younger than the others, perfectly dressed. Her expression was cool, calculating. "Who is that?" Emily asked quietly. "My cousin," Daniel replied. "She does not like surprises." Emily looked back at her, meeting her gaze without flinching. The woman smiled thinly, then turned away. Emily felt the first true crack in the evening's calm. This was not just a performance. This was a battlefield disguised as a living room. And standing at Daniel's side, Emily realized something she had not expected. Tonight was not only about pretending to be his wife. It was about surviving the people who would never believe she deserved to stand there at all. The tension did not announce itself loudly. It crept in quietly, hiding behind polite smiles and carefully chosen words. Emily felt it as she stood beside Daniel, her hand still resting lightly on his arm while conversations flowed around them. Laughter rose and fell, glasses clinked, and yet beneath it all, there was an undercurrent she could not ignore. Eyes followed her when people thought she was not looking. Judgments were made in pauses, in raised eyebrows, in questions that sounded harmless but were anything but. "So, Emily," Daniel's aunt said, tilting her head with practiced curiosity, "how did you and my nephew meet?" Emily answered smoothly. "Through work," she said. "Not the kind you read about, but the kind that pays the bills." A few people chuckled, uncertain whether it was a joke. Daniel's aunt smiled thinly. "That must have been unexpected." "It was," Emily replied. "Most good things are." Daniel felt the subtle shift beside him. Emily was holding her own, but every word cost her something. He tightened his arm just enough to let her know he was there. Across the room, Daniel's cousin watched closely. Her name was Rachel, and she had never liked losing control of a narrative. She approached with a glass of wine, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Emily, right?" Rachel said brightly. "You seem very calm for someone who just married into this family." Emily met her gaze. "Calm comes from knowing who you are," she said, "not where you stand." Rachel smiled, but her eyes hardened. That confidence will be tested. Before Emily could respond, Daniel spoke. "That is enough," he said evenly. "Emily is my wife. You will treat her as such." Rachel raised her glass slightly. "Of course, I was just curious." Curiosity, Emily realized, was a weapon here. As the evening wore on, Daniel's mother asked Emily to sit beside her. The older woman rested often, her strength fading in small, quiet ways. Emily noticed the way Daniel hovered nearby, attentive but restrained, as if afraid to show how much he cared. "You make him calmer," Daniel's mother said softly when Daniel stepped away to take a call. "He carries too much alone." Emily hesitated. "He does not show it." "He never does," the woman replied. "That is why I worried." Emily felt her chest tighten. This was not part of the agreement. This was not acting. This was a woman holding on to hope. Later, when Daniel returned, he found Emily standing near the balcony doors, staring out at the city lights below. He joined her without speaking at first. "You handled them well," he said finally. "They are not cruel," Emily replied. "They are afraid of change." He nodded. "So am I." She turned to him then. "You could have chosen someone else," she said. "Someone who fits better." "I did not need someone who fit," Daniel answered. "I needed someone who would not disappear when things became uncomfortable." Emily studied his face, searching for calculation. She found none. At that moment, a raised voice cut through the room. "Daniel," Rachel called sharply. "We should talk. Now." The room quieted. Daniel looked at Emily. "Stay here," he said. She shook her head. "No, I stand with you. That was the deal." They walked back together, every step watched. Rachel placed a folder on the table. "You should explain this," she said, tapping it, "before everyone else draws their own conclusions." Daniel did not open it. "There is nothing to explain." "There is," Rachel insisted, "because this marriage came out of nowhere, and in this family, nothing happens without a reason." Emily felt the weight of every eye in the room turned toward her. This was no longer a performance. This was a test. And for the first time that night, Emily understood something clearly. Whatever Daniel's hidden reason truly was, it was powerful enough to make enemies, and she was standing directly in its path. The room remained silent after Rachel's words. Every face turned toward Daniel, waiting. Emily could feel the tension tightening around her ribs, the kind that made breathing feel like a choice instead of a reflex. She did not move. She did not look away. If this moment was meant to break her, she would not make it easy. Daniel stepped forward slowly. "There is nothing improper about my marriage," he said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Emily is here because I asked her to be." Rachel crossed her arms. "You asked her," she repeated. "That is exactly the problem." She turned to the others. "Do you all find it strange that Daniel, who avoided commitment for years, suddenly appears with a wife none of us have ever met? No announcement, no warning, just tonight." Murmurs spread through the room. Daniel's mother shifted uncomfortably. "Rachel, this is not the time." Rachel ignored her. "It is exactly the time, because decisions made tonight will affect inheritance, medical authority, and control of family assets." Emily felt Daniel stiffen beside her. So that was it. This was not about love or appearances. This was about power. Emily looked at Daniel, searching his face. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with something he had been holding back all evening. "You should have told me," Emily said quietly. Daniel did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower, rougher. "I wanted to," he said, "but I did not want you to feel trapped." Rachel smiled faintly. Too late. She slid the folder across the table. "Legal documents," she said. "Updated last week. Mother signed them after her last hospital visit." Daniel's mother looked up sharply. "I did not sign anything without reading it." Rachel met her gaze. "You signed what you thought was a medical consent form." The room froze. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Daniel took the folder, opened it, and skimmed the pages. His hands did not shake, but something inside him clearly did. "They gave you two choices," Rachel continued. "Prove you have built a stable family, or surrender control to those who have." Daniel closed the folder. "So that is why you needed a wife," Emily said softly. The words were not accusation, they were realization. Daniel turned to her. At first, he said, yes. Her chest tightened. She had known this was not a fairy tale, but hearing it aloud still hurt. But not anymore, he added quickly. Emily, I swear to you, that is not why I asked you to stay. Rachel laughed quietly. Intentions do not matter. Outcomes do. Emily stepped forward then, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. So let me be clear, she said, addressing the room. I did not marry Daniel for money, control, or advantage. I did not even know this world existed until tonight. Rachel tilted her head. And yet, here you are. Yes, Emily said, because someone asked me to stand beside him when everyone else was prepared to tear him apart. She turned to Daniel's mother. Your son is not weak, he is alone. There is a difference. The older woman's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted this, she whispered. I only wanted to know he would not face what comes next by himself. Emily felt the weight of that sentence settle into her bones. She looked back at Daniel. So this is your hidden reason, she said. Not pride, not image. Fear. Daniel nodded once. Fear of losing her, he said, and fear of losing myself. Emily felt tears rise before she could stop them. Not because she had been used, but because she understood. Rachel watched the exchange, her expression hardening. Understanding does not change the documents. Emily wiped her eyes, then straightened. No, she said, but truth changes people. She turned back to Daniel, her voice quiet but certain. You asked me to stand by you as your wife, she said. I agreed to tonight, nothing more. Daniel held her gaze, waiting. She took a breath. But I will not let anyone use your fear as a weapon, Emily continued. If this family wants a performance, they will not get one from me. They will get honesty. The room held its breath. Rachel's smile faded. Daniel reached for Emily's hand, uncertain, careful. She did not pull away, and in that moment, both of them understood something neither had expected. The contract had been temporary, but the consequences were not. The room slowly began to breathe again. Conversations resumed in cautious tones, but something fundamental had shifted. The certainty Rachel carried earlier had cracked, replaced by unease. Daniel's mother sat quietly now, her hands folded, her gaze fixed on her son with a mixture of regret and relief. Emily felt Daniel's hand still holding hers, not tightly, not possessively, as if he were afraid that if he let go too quickly, she might disappear. Emily, Daniel said quietly, leaning closer so only she could hear him. You should not have been put in that position. She looked at him. Neither should you. He hesitated. We should step outside, just for a moment. She nodded. They moved toward the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below them. The cool night air wrapped around Emily, grounding her in a way the crowded room never could. For the first time since stepping out of the elevator, there was no audience. Daniel rested his hands on the railing, staring out at the skyline he had helped shape. I built everything people see, he said slowly, but I never learned how to build what stays. Emily remained silent, giving him the space to continue. When my father died, Daniel said, everything became about survival, expansion, control. If I stopped moving, I felt like I would lose everything. He turned to her then, including myself. Emily felt the weight of his words settle between them. So you chose distance, she said, because distance feels safer than loss. Daniel nodded. And then my mother became sick. Suddenly, distance was not protection anymore. It was abandonment. Emily leaned against the railing beside him. You were afraid they would take advantage of her fear, she said. Yes, Daniel replied. And they did. He exhaled sharply. Rachel believes power is something you seize before someone else does. I believed power was something you carried alone. Emily looked back through the glass doors at the room they had left behind. And now? Daniel met her gaze. Now I am not sure what power looks like anymore. She considered that for a moment. Power, Emily said, is telling the truth even when it costs you. Daniel let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Then I am very late to learning that. She turned to him fully. Why did you really ask me? She said. Not the documents, not the family, me. Daniel did not answer right away. He seemed to search for the right words, not because he was hiding them, but because he had never practiced saying them aloud. "Because when I looked at you," he said finally, "you were not impressed. You were not afraid. You were not calculating." He swallowed. "You were just there, real. And I needed that more than I needed a perfect solution." Emily felt something tighten in her chest. "That does not make this fair," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied. "That is why I will understand if you walk away now." She studied him, the city reflecting faintly in his eyes. "Do you want me to walk away?" she asked. The question hung between them, fragile and honest. Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "but I will not ask you to stay under false pretenses." Emily nodded. "That matters," she said. They stood in silence for a moment, the noise from inside muffled, distant. Then Emily straightened. "When we go back in," she said, "we do it differently." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "We stop pretending that tonight is about convincing them," she replied. "Tonight is about protecting your mother, and drawing a line." Daniel considered this. "That will make enemies." Emily met his gaze. "I am not afraid of people who mistake control for strength." Something in Daniel's expression shifted. Not relief, not certainty, respect. They turned back toward the doors together. This time, Emily did not take his arm because she was playing a role. She did it because she chose to. And Daniel understood that whatever happened next, the most dangerous part of the evening was already behind them. They had stopped pretending with each other, and that truth carried a weight far greater than any contract ever could. When Daniel and Emily re-entered the room, the atmosphere had changed again. The quiet tension from earlier had sharpened into something more deliberate. Rachel was no longer standing near the table. She was speaking softly with two men Emily had not met yet, both dressed with the ease of people accustomed to influence. One of them held a tablet. The other watched Daniel closely, as if measuring him. Daniel recognized them immediately. Members of the family trust board. So this was no longer personal. It was procedural. Rachel turned as they approached, her expression composed, almost pleased. "Perfect timing," she said. "We were just discussing next steps." Daniel stopped a few feet away. "You mean next threats?" Rachel smiled. "You always did dramatize reality." One of the men stepped forward. "Daniel," he said calmly, "this does not have to become adversarial, but clarity is necessary." "Clarity about what?" Daniel asked, his voice even. "About the legitimacy of this marriage," the man replied, glancing briefly at Emily, "and whether it satisfies the requirements outlined in the amended trust." Emily felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. "So this is what you want," she said quietly, "to turn a family moment into a legal trap." Rachel tilted her head. "We want to protect the future. Appearances are not protection." Daniel took a step forward. "Enough. My mother is exhausted. This discussion ends tonight." Rachel crossed her arms. "It cannot, not when everything is at stake." Emily felt Daniel tense beside her, and she understood something then. This was the moment the script broke. Not for the family, for her. She released Daniel's arm. The movement was small, but it was noticed immediately. Daniel turned to her. "Emily." She met his eyes. "I need to say this." She faced the room. "I agreed to stand here tonight," Emily said clearly. "Not to be interrogated, and not to be used as leverage in a power struggle I did not create." One of the men frowned. "Miss Carter, with respect, your intentions are not the issue." "They are," Emily replied, "because intentions determine whether a person stays or walks away." Rachel's smile faded. "Careful," she said. "You do not understand what you are stepping into." Emily nodded. "You are right. I do not belong to this world." Daniel felt a sharp pull in his chest. "But I do understand one thing," Emily continued. "Fear does not give anyone the right to control someone else's life." She turned to Daniel then, her voice softening. "You asked me to stand beside you," she said. "I did, when it mattered. But I will not be the reason they think they can corner you." Daniel stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Emily replied, "that this stops being fake tonight." The room froze. Rachel laughed once, short and incredulous. "You think walking away helps him?" Emily shook her head. "No. I think staying silent hurts him." She took a breath, steadying herself. "So here is the truth," she said to everyone. Daniel and I agreed to pretend, not because he is weak, but because he was trying to protect his mother from manipulation. Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel's mother looked up sharply. Manipulation? Rachel's face hardened. You are crossing a line. Emily did not look at her. You crossed it first. Daniel stepped forward. Emily, you do not have to do this. She looked at him, eyes bright but calm. Yes, I do. She turned back to the room. If this family wants control, they will take it without me. I will not be your shield, and I will not be your excuse. Silence pressed in from all sides. Emily faced Daniel one last time. I meant what I said earlier, she told him. Tonight ends on my terms. She stepped back, creating space between them that had not existed before. Daniel felt it like a loss. Rachel exhaled slowly, satisfaction flickering behind her eyes. There it is, she said. The truth always finds its way out. Emily picked up her tote bag, but before she could take a step away, Daniel spoke. Wait. Every eye turned back to him, and in that moment, the man who had spent his life avoiding confrontation understood something clearly. This was the point where pretending ended, and where real loss or real courage would finally begin. Daniel's voice cut through the room, steady but unmistakably changed. Wait, he said again. Emily stopped, her back still turned to him. Daniel took a step forward, then another, until he stood between her and the rest of the room. He did not reach for her. He did not try to stop her physically. Instead, he faced the people who had shaped his life through expectation and pressure. This ends now, Daniel said. Rachel laughed softly. You are being emotional. That never ends well in negotiations. This is not a negotiation, Daniel replied. This is a decision. One of the men from the trust board cleared his throat. Daniel, think carefully. Words spoken tonight cannot be withdrawn. Daniel nodded. I am aware. He turned toward his mother, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. Mom, he said gently, everything I built was supposed to protect you. But somewhere along the way, I let it become a weapon they could use against you instead. Her lips trembled. I never wanted to be the reason you were trapped. You were not, Daniel said. I was. Rachel stepped forward. If you proceed with this, she warned, you risk losing control of the trust. The board will intervene. Daniel did not look at her. Then let them. The room reacted immediately. Gasps, whispers, shock. Emily turned slowly, disbelief written across her face. Daniel finally looked at her. I asked you to stand beside me because I was afraid, he said. Afraid of losing my mother. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of standing alone. He took a breath. You did not just stand beside me. You reminded me who I am when I stop hiding. Emily shook her head slightly. Daniel, this costs you everything. Yes, he said, and pretending has already cost me more. He turned back to the room. There will be no more conditions, Daniel said clearly. No more performances. If the trust requires me to sacrifice my integrity to keep it, then I no longer want it. Rachel stared at him. You would throw away your future for someone you met tonight. Daniel answered without hesitation. No, I am reclaiming it. Silence fell heavy and complete. One of the board members exchanged a glance with the other. This will trigger a formal review, he said. You understand that? I do, Daniel replied. Emily stepped forward then, her voice quiet but urgent. You do not have to do this for me. Daniel turned to her, his expression calm, resolved. I am not doing this for you, he said. I am doing this because you showed me what courage looks like. He paused. But I hope you stay long enough to see who I become without all of this. Emily felt her chest tighten, tears threatening again. Not from pain this time, but from something deeper. Rachel scoffed. This is foolish. Daniel met her gaze for the first time since she began her attack. No, what is foolish is believing power matters more than people. He turned back to Emily, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I will not ask you to stay as my wife, he said. Not fake, not real. I will only ask you this. He held her gaze. Do not leave because of them. Emily searched his face, seeing not the millionaire, not the heir, but the man who had finally stepped out from behind his defenses. The room waited. For the first time all night, the decision was not about contracts, appearances, or fear. It was about choice. and Emily understood that whatever she chose next would define not only how this night ended, but what kind of story it would become. The room waited. Emily looked at Daniel for a long moment, long enough for the city lights beyond the windows to blur in her vision. She had walked into this night agreeing to pretend. She had stayed to protect someone else. Now she was being asked to choose for herself. She took a slow breath. "I am not leaving because of them," Emily said quietly. The tension in Daniel's shoulders released, just enough for her to notice. "But I am also not staying because you gave something up," she continued. "I will not be your reward for sacrifice." Daniel nodded. "I would never ask you to be." Emily turned to face the room one last time. "This family does not need another performance," she said, "and Daniel does not need another role to survive." She looked back at him, her voice softer now. "What you did tonight matters, not because it impressed anyone, but because it was honest." Daniel met her gaze. "Then stay," he said simply. "Not as my wife, not as my shield, just stay." Emily considered that. She stepped forward and placed her hand in his. "I will stay," she said, "as myself." Across the room, Rachel exhaled sharply, frustration flashing across her face. The board members exchanged looks, already calculating consequences. Daniel's mother stood slowly, her movements careful. "That is enough," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. "I am tired, and I want to go home." Daniel moved immediately to her side. "I will take you." She smiled at Emily. "I am glad you were here tonight," she said, "no matter what anyone says next." Emily nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "So am I." The evening ended without applause, without closure, without victory speeches. People left quietly, unsettled by a truth they could not undo. The room emptied, leaving only echoes and the soft hum of the city outside. Later, Daniel walked Emily to the elevator. Neither of them spoke at first. When the doors opened, Emily paused. "Tomorrow will be difficult," she said. "You know that." Daniel nodded. "I do." "You might regret what you did," she added. "I already regret not doing it sooner," he replied. She smiled faintly. "Then we will see what comes next." The elevator doors closed between them, carrying Emily down and Daniel back into the life he had just changed. Weeks later, the headlines would talk about trust disputes and corporate restructuring. They would speculate about Daniel Wright's decisions and question his future. They would not talk about the night a man chose integrity over control, or about the woman who refused to be a role but stayed anyway. On a quiet afternoon not long after, Daniel stood in a small coffee shop far from boardrooms and glass towers. Emily was there, laughing softly over a spilled cup, entirely unremarkable to anyone else. He watched her, understanding something at last. Real commitment did not begin with contracts or promises made under pressure. It began when pretending was no longer necessary. And when he finally spoke again, the words were different. Not an agreement, not a request. "Stay with me," Daniel said, "as my wife." This time, there was nothing to hide and nothing left to fear.